Let me paint you a picture. It is early March 2026. A movie lands on Netflix with zero theatrical release, no major marketing push, and a premise that sounds like someone fed a Predator plot summary into a random title generator. Army Rangers, alien robot, remote wilderness. Man named 81. And somehow, within 7 days, 93 countries have it at number 1. 128 million views later, that movie is now knocking on the door of Netflix all-time history. And the guy at the center of it all is the same person who has been quietly, methodically, and very physically becoming the most reliable streaming star on the planet right now. That man is Alan Ritchson, and the movie is War Machine. Today we are going deep on what actually happened here because the numbers tell a fascinating story and the story behind the numbers is even more interesting. Let us back up a little because if you do not understand who Alan Ritchson is and how he got here, the War Machine situation does not fully make sense. This guy has been around for a long time. He was on American Idol in 2004. He played Aquaman in Smallville. He was Raphael in the Michael Bay Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles films, which, let us be honest, is not something he probably puts at the top of his resume. He has even said in interviews he would rather people forget about that one. But none of that made him a household name. What did it was Jack Reacher. When Prime Video launched Reacher in 2022, something clicked. Ritchson was not just playing a character, he was essentially redefining what a streaming action hero could look like. Lee Child, the author of the Reacher novels, had long complained that Tom Cruise, despite being a great actor, was physically wrong for the role. Reacher in the books is described as 6'5", built like a tank, and capable of looking dangerous just by standing still. Ritchson, at 6'2", is about as close to that description as you are going to get from a working actor in Hollywood, and the show exploded because of it. 3 seasons in, the show is a legitimate Prime Video powerhouse. He just signed a 3-year first-look television deal with Amazon MGM Studios through his own production company. Reacher Season 4 is on the way. A spin-off called Neegly is in development. The man has become the tentpole of an entire streaming franchise. So when a sci-fi movie from Lionsgate needed a new home and Netflix came calling, they did not just get a film. They got a built-in audience of tens of millions of people who already trust this guy to carry an action story. That context matters a lot for understanding what happened next. Okay, so let us actually talk about the movie itself, because I think the premise is more interesting than it gets credit for. War Machine is directed by Patrick Hughes, who is known for The Hitman's Bodyguard and The Expendables 3. Not exactly high art, but the man knows how to shoot action. Ritchson plays a character known only as 81, a combat veteran carrying serious trauma who enrolls in the final stage of U.S. Army Ranger selection. So the setup is a military training film, a tough, grueling, elite soldiers pushing their limits kind of story. And then right in the middle of it, a giant alien machine crashes into their remote training area and the whole movie shifts gears. Critics called it the love child of Predator and Independence Day, and honestly that comparison is not wrong. You have got a crew of soldiers in a hostile environment, an extraterrestrial threat picking them off, and one physically imposing hero who refuses to quit. The Hollywood Reporter called it the kind of movie built for people who never got to watch Predator in theaters during its original run. Now here is where the review situation gets complicated. The critical response was genuinely split. Some reviewers, like Collider, said it was the action vehicle Ritchson had been waiting for. Others were less generous. A few pointed out that the supporting characters are basically what film critics call red shirts, meaning they exist primarily to get destroyed by the alien. The story itself does not take a lot of risks. There is not a lot of wit or humor the way Predator had Arnold Schwarzenegger one-liners baked in. But here is the thing that makes War Machine a genuinely interesting case study. The audience did not care. IMDb gave it a 6.4. The Rotten Tomatoes audience score landed at 69%. Not spectacular numbers by any metric. But viewers showed up in enormous numbers anyway, and then they kept showing up week after week. That gap between critical opinion and audience behavior is something we need to sit with for a moment. Let me walk you through the timeline because the numbers week by week are genuinely wild. War Machine dropped on March 6, 2026. In its first tracking week, it secured 39.3 million views and debuted at number 1 in 93 countries. That is not a soft open. That is a statement. Week 2, it did not drop. It went up 44.4 million views in the second week. For context, most Netflix movies lose somewhere between 40 and 60% of their audience from week 1 to week 2. War Machine went the opposite direction. That is not common. It then stayed in Netflix's global top 10 for 8 consecutive weeks. To find the last Netflix original movie that managed that kind of sustained chart presence, you have to go back to K-Pop Demon Hunters, the animated musical from Sony Pictures Animation that landed in August 2025, and which, if you have not heard of it, became Netflix's most-watched movie of all time with a staggering 325 million views. That is the company War Machine was keeping in terms of longevity on the charts. By the time War Machine exited the global top 10, it had accumulated 128.4 million views. Its final charting week brought in 3.2 million views. The math at that point showed it needed just 9.6 million more to break into Netflix's top 10 most-watched movies ever. It came close enough to make it genuinely painful. It missed by less than 10 million views. To give you a sense of how tight that margin is, the current number 10 spot on Netflix's all-time movie list belongs to Millie Bobby Brown's Damsel, which finished with 138 million views. And here is the kicker about how that benchmark works. Netflix only counts views for the first 91 days of a film's release when calculating its all-time charts. War Machine still has a couple of weeks left in that eligibility window, but it would need an unusual second wind surge to cross the line. That surge has not happened yet, and given that the film got only 3.2 million views in its last charting week, even a healthy bump outside the charts probably does not get it to that 138 million threshold. So close, and yet, here is the part of the story that does not get talked about enough. War Machine was originally supposed to be a theatrical release. Lionsgate had plans for a cinema run. At some point, those plans changed and the film ended up being acquired by Netflix for streaming. Now, in traditional Hollywood thinking, that is a demotion. You make a movie to go to theaters. Streaming is what happens when a film cannot compete with the big dogs. There is a stigma attached to it that the industry has not fully shaken yet. But what War Machine actually demonstrated is that for a certain type of film with a certain type of star, streaming is not a consolation prize. It is the optimal distribution model. Think about who watches Predator-style action movies. They tend to be genre fans, people who consume a lot of content on streaming services, people who discover things through algorithms and friend recommendations, not because they drove past a billboard. The War Machine audience was not going to be built in multiplexes in major cities. It was going to be built through Netflix autoplay, through top 10 charts, through subscribers browsing on a Friday night. Lionsgate made the right call even if it was not their original plan. And Netflix made an even smarter call by acquiring it. They took a film that already had Ritchson's name attached, a genre with built-in demand, and a director who knows how to deliver action competently, and they dropped it into an ecosystem that rewards exactly those qualities. 128 million views is not an accident. It is the result of an acquisition that was well targeted to the platform's audience. Let us talk about the list that War Machine almost crashed. Netflix's all-time most-watched movie rankings currently look like this. Number 1 is K-Pop Demon Hunters at 325 million views. That movie is genuinely one of the most surprising cultural phenomena of the past couple of years. An animated K-pop musical that became the single most-watched Netflix movie ever made. If you have not seen it, it is genuinely worth checking out. Number 2 is Red Notice. Dwayne Johnson, Ryan Reynolds, and Gal Gadot in a heist action comedy. 230 million views. That one held the all-time record for 4 years before K-Pop Demon Hunters dethroned it. Number 3 is Carry On, the 2024 action thriller at 172 million views. Number 4, Don't Look Up, the 2021 satire with Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence. 171 million views. 5, 6, 7, 8. The Adam Project, Bird Box, Back in Action, Leave the World Behind. Number 9 is The Gray Man at 139 million views. And number 10, currently, is Damsel at 138 million. War Machine at 128 million views lands just outside that list, between Damsel in 10th and whatever falls in 11th. Think about that for a second. Of every movie Netflix has ever released, War Machine is somewhere around the 11th or 12th most watched of all time. That is an astonishing result for a film that cost less than a blockbuster theatrical production, starred someone who was not yet a proven movie draw, and received a mixed critical reception. This is the part where I want to push back on anyone who looks at almost top 10 as a failure. 11th on Netflix's all-time list is Elite. It is a number that none of the major streaming services' average releases ever get anywhere near. Now we get to the really interesting part, because the War Machine conversation is not over. there have been discussions about a War Machine sequel. Lionsgate has reportedly not officially announced one, but their film head Adam Fogelson has publicly acknowledged that the studio is not opposed to the idea, and that Netflix would have the opportunity to acquire a sequel if one gets made. Here is why that matters beyond just the obvious popular movie gets sequel angle. The viewership data for War Machine does not just prove that people watched a movie. It proves that a specific type of film with a specific type of star has a repeatable audience on Netflix. When you release a sequel to a film that hit 128 million views, you are not starting from zero awareness. You are starting from an audience of over 100 million people who already know the world, know the character, and made a choice to spend time with it. That is enormously valuable, and it is the kind of foundation that allows Netflix sequels to outperform their originals, which is not always the case but happens with the right property. Look at what happened with Extraction. The Chris Hemsworth action movie did well, then Extraction 2 did considerably better because the baseline audience was already built. The same logic could apply here. But there is also an argument from the other direction. War Machine's original premise, Army Ranger training plus alien machine crash, is fairly complete as a single story. A sequel would need to find a reason to exist beyond just doing the same thing again with better CGI. The alien is already established. What is the next threat? How do you escalate in a way that feels earned and not just manufactured? That is a real creative challenge. And the track record of streaming action sequels that tried to manufacture escalation without strong storytelling is not encouraging. Still, if Ritchson is involved, if the sequel has the same energy and the right director, I think it has a genuine shot at surpassing the original's numbers. Step back from War Machine specifically and look at what Alan Ritchson's 2026 represents for the entertainment industry at large. This is a person whose entire film career before Reacher was a collection of supporting roles and franchise bit parts. His biggest theatrical credits before the streaming era were, realistically, Fast X and a couple of roles in ensemble films. None of those made him a name people bought tickets specifically to see, but streaming changed the math. Reacher gave him a platform where the audience came to him, episode after episode, season after season. That repeated exposure built a level of viewer loyalty that is genuinely hard to manufacture through theatrical releases. By the time War Machine landed on Netflix, Ritchson had an audience that was not just aware of him but actively wanted to spend time with him on screen. This year alone, he has War Machine on Netflix, Reacher Season 4 on Prime Video, a film called Runner coming to theaters in September, and a revenge thriller called Motor City that is heading to cinemas. He is also set to work alongside Arnold Schwarzenegger in something called The Man with the Bag for Amazon. And he just signed a 3-year first-look television deal with Amazon MGM Studios. That is not a career. That is a franchise empire. And none of it would exist without the streaming era creating a new path to stardom that bypasses the traditional theatrical box office entirely. Ritchson is not alone in this, but he might be the clearest example currently working of how streaming-first stardom can become genuine, cross-platform cultural significance. So where does War Machine land in the final analysis? It missed the Netflix all-time top 10 by under 10 million views. It spent 8 weeks in the global charts. It racked up 128 million views despite mixed reviews. It is being talked about as franchise material. And it cemented Alan Ritchson as a genuine streaming-era superstar who can carry a film on a platform he has never headlined before. If that is a near miss, most movies in Hollywood would trade places with it in a heartbeat. The record did not fall, but the run was remarkable enough that the conversation is not really about the record. It is about what comes next. Because an audience that big does not just disappear, it waits. And if War Machine 2 ever arrives on Netflix, those 128 million people are going to be the head start that no other sequel gets to have. I am going to keep watching this space closely, and if you want more breakdowns on streaming data, box office trends, and the kind of nerdy analysis that keeps me up at night reading Netflix charts, make sure you are subscribed. I will see you in the next one.